But the most fascinating story of this survival is of Wilco van Rooyen, because he had already spent a night above the serac. He had already spent a night in the death zone without oxygen. He came down the bottleneck and he was extremely exhausted. He was so thirsty and he was already snow blinded. He says that I was actually eating snow, which obviously hurts his mouth as well as increases the chances of hypothermia, lowers the temperature of his body, and speeds up the frostbite process on his toes and all that. He says, I came down the bottleneck, I stopped at the bottom of the bottleneck, I did not know what to do, where to go, because I was so exhausted. I tried to make a call to my wife in Holland, and his wife was actually the one who actually communicated to the base camp that the Wilco is alive and he's somewhere trying to find his way down, which obviously initiated a lot of panic in the base camp as well as the search and rescue team who were actually helping the stranded climbers. Wilco says that I fainted. This was the end for him, and he actually fainted, and he fell unconscious. And obviously, in these conditions, if you fell unconscious, if you're alone, this is most likely the end of a climber in this altitude and temperatures. But he tells a very spiritual story. He says that my son, who was 6 months old back in Holland, he fell in a fit of crying, and he was crying so out loud that everyone in the family was so worried as to what has happened. And this was the time that I actually came back to consciousness. This is such an amazing coincidence, and obviously they were able to coincide the timing of both incidents. And he says that this was the time that I came back to consciousness and I started my way down once again. Wilco, in the history of climbing, is the only climber who has spent 3 days in the death zone. He was not able to find his way back to Camp 4. Instead, he descended towards the Sesson route on the south side, and he was just going down and down until he was able to spot tents in some distance, and he was able to see Cass standing in amazement and in horror as to how Wilco has survived. There are a few things that we need to understand and study as to why were the statements so twisted by some of the climbers, especially Marco. We can obviously give a benefit of doubt to Marco in one such incident, in one such statement, considering the fact that he was hallucinating, he had been in death zone for 2 days, and he was not in the right mental state, and he may have heard or said things that he did not intend to. But consecutive twisted statements coming from Marco obviously made things difficult. And Gerard, who was the first Irishman to actually climb K2, he had, in all his climbing career, has been known as one of the most compassionate of climbers, always ready to help. He was not the kind of climber who would panic or be under pressure in testing times. He was quite famous for his compassion during his climbing endeavors. So obviously for Gerard's family and for the people of Ireland, for that matter, it was very sad to get this twisted side of the story from Marco, which was later confirmed that this was not the case, and Gerard was going up there actually to help the Koreans, and he was able to actually get the 3 Koreans freed from their entanglement, and 2 of them actually did survive. Why did climbers lie or try to hide the facts? It's probably because this was a kind of incident that grabbed the international limelight like none other climbing incident in the history, and the back-to-back press conferences and the signing of the books and the interviews. The whole international media was descending on these survivors to get the first-hand account of what has happened and how they have survived. So probably Marco decided to add a pint of suspense and drama in a way that he would be recognized as a hero of the whole incident. Also, alongside a very sad face of the whole ordeal was the fact that Meherban Karim was ignored, completely ignored by his French climbing mate. At 10 a.m. next day, Meherban Karim was sighted walking on top of the serac, and then he slips and falls to his death. How did he survive the night? Did he have a radio contact with the base camp? Was he carrying a sat phone with him? Was he able to communicate with his climbing mate or his family the last night of his life? It's just very, very sad. The two heroes that came out were later recognized by all and sundry were the Nepali Sherpa Pemba, who was not only able to give straightforward statements, who actually stood by the truth, and was also able to rescue a couple of climbers during the process. So this is really sad how the things unfolded in that 2008 incident on K2. Most of the climbers on that expedition, on that summit push, died during the descent, which is what happens on K2 so often. But also, I think the climber community were able to realize that how important it is to state the facts as they are, because Gerard's family, on one hand, they struggled to find the truth for the next several months. They were denied access to the climbers. They were all busy, with the interviews and with signing the books and all that. And they finally were able to find the truth, the fact that Gerard was actually trying to help the Korean climbers, and he died in the process. And also Pemba Sherpa, because of his selfless effort to save a couple of stranded climbers on that day, he was honored by the National Geographic Society by a cover photo on one of their magazines. This was an attempt by us to investigate actually as to what has happened on that day on K2. And the most intimidating section on any of the 8,000ers, the bottleneck and the serac, and most of the times when the climbers are confronted with this serac, they have this fear that probably this can break any time, and obviously if it breaks loose, nobody is going to survive. But normally it does not happen. And this is the place, this is probably the most feared place on any of the 8,000ers. And on that fateful day, the serac actually broke loose, and not just once. In a matter of about 1 day, it broke 4 times, killing several climbers on K2. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more to come.